Hello everybody, this is Lauren Harpster from Bead and Blossom. Today we are doing lesson 2 of my Learn French Beading beginner course, and we're going to be learning our next technique, which is the crossover loop. Now this is another one of our continuous techniques, meaning that all of these petals are all made on one length of wire. Now it's going to be helpful if you already know the continuous loop technique, which was taught in lesson 1, but I will be demonstrating this in full here, so you should be able to follow along just from this video. Now the crossover loop is built on top of a continuous loop, meaning that you'll make a simple beaded loop, just like the continuous loops, and then we're going to make another row, another loop of beads that goes over the front and then down the back of the continuous loop. All right, let's go get started. Alright, so I've got my size 11 seed beads strung onto 24 gauge copper core wire, and we're ready to go with crossover loops. Alright, the sample pattern that we're going to be working with is 7 continuous crossover loops using 1 1/4 inches of beads for the starting loop. Now, just like the continuous loop technique, we're going to need to leave a small tail wire here. It's going to be 2 or 3 inches unless the pattern says otherwise. And we're going to measure out the beads we need for our starting loop, which is 1 1/4 inches. And we're going to start by making a continuous loop. You're going to fold those beads in half, match up the ends, and hold the beads tight between your thumb and forefinger so that no gaps form between any of your beads. And then we're going to twist the 2 wires below, once, twice. You don't want to twist down any further with a crossover loop, or you're going to have more wire exposed, and it's going to pull your working wire down further, which is going to make more slack for your beads to slide around on this next row. Now I like to take my starting loop and give it a little pinch so that you've got just a narrow little gap in between. And then we're going to bring the working wire up over the front of the starting loop and give it a nice little tug so that wire is really tight against the bottom of your starting loop. Bring more beads down from your spool and push them all the way down and line them up so that they're even with or right above the bottom of your starting loop. And then we're going to measure the beads that we need to reach the top. And you want this top of the crossover row to be even with or below the top of the starting loop. And then we're going to take bare wire. Let me zoom in here so you can see this part a little bit better. All right. So we're going to fold bare wire between 2 beads right at the tip of our loop. That's what's going to help hold this next row in place. And I like to fold my wire really tightly against the back, just because it holds this row, this front of the crossover, in place while I bring more beads down. Alright, so bring more beads down and we're going to fold them over the back of the starting loop. And again, you want to push them all the way up so that they're right against the bottom center of that, the tip of your starting loop. And I'm going to hold them in place and measure out the beads that I need to reach the bottom. Straighten out that bottom wire if it's bent. Alright, so I'm going to pinch and hold that row in place. And then I'm going to wrap my working wire around that bottom wire at least twice. 2 or 3 times would be fine. Make sure you're wrapping really tight and really close together. And that is the tie off for the first petal. Now, this is a continuous technique, so we're going to continue making more all on the same wire. We measure out the beads we need for our starting loop, which is 1 1/4 inches. And just like our continuous loops, we need to leave a small space in our wire. Now this is a little bit larger for a crossover loop than for a continuous loop. You could probably go about 1/4 inch. But again, that's something you want to play with as you're working with the technique. And then we're going to pinch and hold that wire space so that it doesn't move around. And we're going to fold our beads in half and match up the bottoms. And then we're going to grab our loop and twist it to twist the 2 wires below. 1, 2 twists. And we're going to pinch and mold our starting loop so that it's nice and narrow. And then bring our working wire up over the front and give it a nice tug so that that wire is nice and tight at the bottom. And we're going to bring more beads down from our spool and line them up with the bottom of our starting loop. And then we're going to measure the beads so that they're even with or just below that starting loop tip. And we're going to fold that bare wire between 2 beads right in the middle. And then push it really tight against the back to hold that all in place while you slide more beads up. And then we're going to fold down over the back of the starting loop and make sure your beads are pressed all the way against the top. Measure the beads you need to reach the bottom. And you want to make sure that these beads, I don't know if I mentioned this with the first petal, but you want to make sure that it does go all the way to the bottom without going below the loop. Now if your petals are beside each other like this, you're going to want to bend that first one at a 90-degree angle just to get it out of the way. And so that this little bottom wire below is nice and straight so that you can make your wraps nicely. So we're going to pinch and hold everything tightly together and then wrap 2 or 3 times around that bottom wire. And you'll notice that there is a little tiny bit of space left over between the petals, which is exactly what you want. If you put them too close together, they tend to bunch up on top of each other. And if you put them too far apart, your petals will be your petal unit will be too large for your flower. It's going to push that outward, that center circle in the middle, it's going to make it bigger. All right, so bring more beads down to make the starting loop for our next petal. Measure out 1 1/4 inches. Leave a small space in your wire. Pinch and hold it. Fold your beads and match them up. And then you're going to grab and twist your loop. 1, 2. Bring that working wire tight up over the front. Mold that starting loop so that there's just a narrow little gap in between. Bring more beads down from the spool and line them up with the bottom of your starting loop. Measure the beads you need to reach the top without going past it. Fold bare working wire between 2 beads at the top and push it down to hold the tension while you get more beads. Fold beads down the back side of the starting loop. Make sure that wire is straight and wrap. All right, so I've got all 7 of my petals made. As you can see, they start out kind of flat and cylindrical. And what I like to do is to flatten them just between my thumb and forefinger so that all those rows of beads lay beside each other rather than in a circle cylinder shape. Sorry. We'll flatten them together just between your thumb and forefinger. All right, now there we've got 7 finished petals. And we're going to close this just the exact same way that we would a continuous unit, or sorry, continuous loops. We're going to take our working wire and we're going to cross it down between the first and second petals and pull that in. And you want to make sure that you're leaving the same amount of space between this petal and this one as you are with all the other ones. You don't want to pull them too tightly together. And then wrap once around below the bottom of the petal. Got stuck on a bead there. And I'm going to go ahead and center my stem wires below. So I'm going to cross over and I'm going to loop around a petal on the other side. And then bring both that starting tail wire and the working wire together below. And then twist them together near the center. And again, you want to make sure that your twists are as smooth as you can make them. You don't need to twist down very far, usually only about an inch. You don't really want, you want to kind of minimize the amount of bumps that are going to be on your flower stem, but I do find that twisting them together makes them a little bit stronger, so I do twist them down a little bit. But to twist them smoothly as you can, you're going to open them up to about the same angle away from the twisted stem wire in the center. And then apply even pressure while you spin. And then you cut it from the spool. And again, we're going to clip these to different lengths here so that the wires won't all end at the exact same spot on your flower stem. All right, that is how to do continuous crossover loops.